And all of a sudden, I started getting stuff that used to take me 8 hours, 72 hours a week is what I averaged. I started working a 40-hour work week. Okay. I started
Wow.
going home at 5, you know, and I got everything done that they wanted done, you know. So this wasn't sacrifice work, you know, but it was because I started being very deliberate because you know what? The truth is most of us waste a crap load of time at work.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't believe me? Walk up and down at your work and watch what's on people's computer screens.
Episode number 94. You can get all the show notes and resources at dadhackers.us/094. What's up, Dad Hackers? My name is Patrick Antonucci, and I am the host and founder of this podcast and community of Dad Hackers. Dad Hackers is a community of Christian fathers who are devoted to encouraging, equipping, and enabling one another to become the men that God has created and called us to be, so that we can raise up the next generation of fully devoted followers of Christ and leave a legacy of multi-generational faithfulness. Now, on this show, we primarily interview Christian men to dive deep into their experiences and insights into what it means to be a Christian man, a Christian husband, a Christian father, and a Christian leader. We ask questions that dig deep into the thinking and rationale and experiences of these men so that we can all learn and grow into the men that God is calling us to be. I'm so thankful that you've joined us today. Make sure you subscribe so that you never miss any of our value-packed episodes. Also, please make sure you leave an honest review if you're listening to this in iTunes or any other platform that takes reviews. Reviews boost the show's ratings, which means that more dads are going to come across our show and benefit from the content that we put out. I also wanted to let you know that we do have a free private Facebook group just for Christian dads. So after the show, make sure you hop on over to the show notes. There's a link for that in there as well. All right, Scott, how are you doing today, man?
I am doing pretty good. We actually, here in Texas, we're having a little bit of a cold snap. So, you know, we've got like 48 degrees this morning, which for most of the country, they're looking at me going, wait, what? You said cold. But for us, that's chilly.
Yeah. We up here in Pennsylvania, we too have been hitting a little bit of a cold snap. It's been like in the 20s. Yeah. And we actually got some snow. It's crazy. We haven't had really much snow this year.
No, snow has been light this year. A lot of my friends up north have been telling me that compared to, you know, years in the past. Now, I know they're still getting it some places. So for those of you that are getting it, sorry, or happy if you love it, you know, whichever. But yeah, apparently it's a little lighter this year than it normally is. Of course, we don't. Down here, I live near San Antonio, and so my joke is we get snow here about every 20 years. So, you know, and it's, you know, and it's that much and it lasts for like 4 hours and then it's gone. So, but that's our snow.
Yeah. And everybody probably flips out because they've never.
Oh, yeah. You know, we shut the whole town down. Nobody can do anything. You know, it's like, I don't know what to do.
Right. Well, Scott, man, I really appreciate you coming on the show. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, your context, what you do. And then we'll roll into some good stuff. I think we have a good conversation set up for us that's really going to add value to a lot of guys.
Yeah, I hope folks get value out of it. That's really what I'm here to do, is just kind of pour into folks and hopefully help them break free with a few things. But a little bit about my journey. So I was a school teacher for 16 years. I taught science. Where I taught middle school, I taught high school, I taught adult ed for a while, you know, done all of that stuff. And I really just kind of burned out on that. I loved teaching. I loved engaging with the students, but, and I understand, Patrick, you know, you know this too, you're a teacher yourself. There's a lot of other stuff that goes with teaching, and I burned out on a lot of the other stuff, if that makes sense. So,
right.
You know, and so I moved out of that and I went into a corporate gig for about 11 years, where I wrote tests for a living. I worked for an educational testing company. so my students looked at me and said I joined the dark side. Basically, they thought I turned to the evil. But that was actually, it was an interesting business. I moved up in that business. I got up into senior leadership and did that for about 11 years. So that was, kind of another part of my journey where I ran a team of 150, 160 people, had managers reporting to me who had people reporting to them, and all of those things that go along with the corporate gig. But a big part of that was I was a road warrior. I was on the road 3-4 months out of the year, going to see clients, in California, in Tennessee, in Maryland, in,
Yeah.
whatever. Didn't make it to Pennsylvania, but a lot of states,
We'll forgive you.
racked up a lot of frequent flyer miles. And that got old too. During that same period, my wife and I have been married almost 27 years now. We have a boy. He's 16 now, learning how to drive. Yay. I'm real thrilled about that. You can tell. That's always fun. A lot of prayers, please, for that. And she and I, in that journey, began realizing that we really enjoyed kind of pouring into other couples, pouring into men and to women. We kind of had our own faith journey at this point, and so we started getting more involved in the church and having opportunities to sit down and work with people on what eventually became what I do now is my business. But at that time, we weren't even sure what it was. But we would sit down and we would run into a couple that was really struggling around their finances, and we had our own journey towards getting out of debt, and so we'd sit down and start helping them. And other times I'd run into men and they'd be really struggling with this area of work-life balance and how do I juggle my time? And, Scott, man, you're doing so much, and, you're active in the church and you're here and you're doing things with your family, and how do you balance all of that? And so I'd start sitting down and kind of pouring into them on, how do I manage my time? And then we started running into people and they're like, well, you moved up in your company so fast and you're in a leadership position, can you help me learn how to be a better leader? And I looked up one day and I'm like, my wife and I sat down and talked about it. We're like, okay, what we're helping people with is stewardship. What we're really doing is helping people, the way we put it, master their time, their talent, and their treasures so that they can live out their calling, whatever that is. Sometimes that's being a better corporate person. Sometimes that's being a better dad. Sometimes that's managing your time better. Sometimes that's learning how to, deal with your finances in a responsible way. Whatever, it's all of those components of your life. How do you deal with your resources in a way that pours into and gives glory to God? And we began doing that. We started that in 2011, and over the years it grew. And starting in 2017, my wife and I took that as our full-time business. So that is, I run a coaching business now. That's what feeds my family and keeps the lights on. And my wife supports me in that and does a lot of behind the scenes. And we even do some speaking events and some coaching and some things together as well. So she's, fully involved in the business as well. So that's kind of a little bit of our journey. There's a lot in there, and I'm sure we'll touch on some other pieces of it as we go forward.
Sure, man. Yeah, I really appreciate the conversation we're about to have, because this is an area that's near and dear to my heart personally, as I work to be more productive and like you said, a better steward of your time. I often think about how in the context of fatherhood, we only have a finite number of years, let's say 18, with our children to impact them, to love, teach, train, discipline, instruct, disciple them so that they can launch out into the real world as fully functioning adults as part of God's kingdom to do his work. And for a lot of us in the Dad Hackers community, we didn't grow up in a Christian home. We weren't embedded with this type of multi-generational mindset or this stewardship mindset. So I'm really looking forward to this. So how do you think, well, let me say it like this. Whenever you work with a client and his life is kind of hectic, he's come to you because he feels out of balance. And I'll tell you, a lot of guys coming into the Dad Hackers group, that's their number one challenge that they have is work, family, balance. We want to excel in our career. We want to excel at home,
Right.
and we want to also chase that dream or that calling that God's put on our heart. But then when we start getting into that, as you know, it's really, really difficult because you only have 24 hours in a day. You got to sleep at some point. You still have to provide for your family, and you
Right.
can't make more time. You know?
And you actually touched on a lot of really important things in the way you asked that question. That's kind of the first step is you've got to acknowledge a couple of realities. Okay. The first one is you have 24 hours in a day. You have 168 hours in a week. That's it. So does everyone else. Okay. There's nobody gets an extra day. You know, it's not like
Right.
someone down the road. It's like they have, I don't know, whatever day that would be. You know, they have this extra magical day in the week. That doesn't happen. Okay.
You know,
People
Scott,
don't get an extra hour. Go ahead.
it's
Yeah.
interesting you bring that up because I often think of that, how there are guys that seem to be nailing it in every area. I mean,
Right.
Sometimes you think, oh, well, if you're
But
killing
he's
it,
doing this.
yeah, if you're killing it in your career, you got to be losing at home, or if you're killing it at home, you got to be sacrificing your dream. But then you see guys that just seem to be excelling in all areas, and I think they have the same 24 hours. What is it that they have that I'm missing that I need to get? Do I just need to be more efficient? Do I just need to be more disciplined, more consistent?
And the short answer to that question is yes and no.
I knew it.
Okay. Because here's the thing. We look at it as if it's a magic trick. Okay. We look at it as if it's wow, they got it all together. First off, the first thing I want to acknowledge too, again, let's acknowledge some realities. You think they have it all together.
Mm-hmm.
You see it from the outside as if they do. But keep in mind that you don't see other people's reality. You see their highlight reel.
Yeah.
Okay. What you see is what they choose to let the world see. I will give you a real world example. I have had a client in the past who came to me for financial stuff. That was actually what we were working on. They had this big house in a nice neighborhood with nice cars, sitting in the, driving the nicest car, doing that kind of thing. They literally had no furniture.
Oh, wow.
Like zero, none. If you walk, they never had company over, because if you walked in their house, you could suddenly saw the reality. Okay. They were sleeping in sleeping bags. They couldn't afford furniture, but they needed the nice house and the nice school district with the nice cars so that they had the, keeping up appearances, right? Look, and from the outside looking in, you're like, man, they've got a great, marriage, and they're, this, and they've got kids, and no, they didn't. Okay. They just put that out into the world as a reality. So first off, acknowledge the fact that you may or may not be seeing the full picture. Okay. Second thing, let's assume for a minute this is somebody you know well, and you are seeing the full picture. You really do sit down. It's a mentor. It's somebody that, has maybe you see and you really admire, and you've had the conversations, you've dug in deep, and you really actually do know, man, they really do have a life like that really is, it's not perfect, because nobody's life is perfect. Right. As Christians, we are not promised the perfect life free of pain. Okay. If that was Jesus's promise, would have much better marketing. It would be a lot easier. It's like, that's not it. That's not the message. So that it's not perfect, but it's good. You look at it and you go, man, dude, you really have it together. Okay. Here's the other problem. Oftentimes we're comparing our beginning to somebody else's middle or somebody else's end, or we're comparing our middle to someone else's end. Okay. In other words, we're at a different point in this journey. That's not a good or bad thing. That's not a value judgment. That's an observation of reality. That doesn't mean, even if you're the same age, that doesn't mean that you failed. That doesn't mean that man, I must really stink because I just turned 40 and I'm not a millionaire yet. No. Okay. The three guys I know down the road, they've got it all together. They've got this, they've got that. No, that's not what that means. It just means you're at a different point in your journey. Okay.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because you can often get sucked into that. I know personally I can, like, I'm 38,
Oh
so I'm
yeah.
almost at that 40 mark. And I'm like, I should be further along in this thing. And I'm looking at this other guy, and he's younger than me, and he's further along in this thing. And that's that comparison trap
Oh
that
yeah.
so dangerous that I know men are very susceptible to get into that comparison trap, because that competitive nature kicks in. And then, it's just,
Well, it's how we measure each other. I mean, stop and think for a minute. Two men meet. Within 30 seconds, they're asking each other, what do you do?
yep.
And inherent in that question is actually, where are you in the hierarchy of jobs?
Yeah.
Because if you have this kind of job, then you're somehow better than somebody who has this kind of job, whatever this and this is. I'm literally not naming a job on purpose, because quite frankly, I don't believe that hierarchy is real, but people do that mentally. It's, oh, I don't want to
Oh
talk
yeah.
to this person because they're below me. No, but it is kind of how we have a tendency to view the world that way. And as guys, here's the other thing. You can't even compare your middle to someone else's middle. And what I mean by that is, even if y'all are, you're both 38, you just said it, another guy's 38, man, he's younger than me, or he's older. If somebody else is right in that same age as you, that same point in the life, the truth is, if you were to rewind their life and rewind your life, y'all came from different places. You had different family dynamics. You have different personalities. You have different mental wiring. You have all of this sort of stuff that's under the surface. You can't observe it.
Yeah.
That is part of what got you to where you are today. I grew up with challenges. I grew up with a father who abused alcohol. He abused prescription drugs. That creates things in my psyche and my mental outlook and the way I view things that I have to work through and deal with.
Yeah.
That puts me in a different place in my journey than someone else. By the way, not better, not worse. I'm not saying my life was so hard or my life. That's not the comparison. It's just, it puts me in a different place. Again, it's reality,
Yeah.
and it's okay to acknowledge those things, because that is part of the first step, is you got to unpack some things about who you are, how you're wired, where did you come from, what do you want? Okay. What are your priorities? What are your values? Most of us don't ever sit down and think about those things. Instead, we just start getting out there and hustling and climbing the corporate ladder or starting our business or doing whatever. And we never actually stop and think, wait, is this really what I want? Is this really what God wants for me? Is this really the thing that I'm designed to do? How many men do you know that, at 45 years old, look up and are like, I don't have the life that I want? We even have a name for it, right? Midlife crisis.
Right.
Yeah. And the truth is, more often than not, it's because they're undergoing. That's all of a sudden when they look up and go, wait, I'm not building what I thought was important to me. I'm not going the direction that I thought I should be going. I need to redo it. Now, oftentimes we react to that in a very bad way. Okay. And that's where men can do some really stupid stuff, like, divorce their wives and go marry the secretary, or buy the Corvette, and do weird things that are like not really going to solve that problem, but they try to fill that hole with something. The truth is, stepping back and being very deliberate about analyzing who you are, how you're wired, and what do you want. And if you're married, do that with your spouse. If you've got kids and they're old enough, involve your kids in that too. Like, we have a family motto. This is things that, if you are a Maderer, this is what you do. This is who we are. And my son was raised with that kind of idea from 3 and 4 years old. We don't go into debt. We don't borrow money. We help other people. We're kind. We're loving. These are things that we do. And since he's been immersed in that and seen that from a very young age, he didn't even question it. That's just reality,
Yeah.
And so we've got a teenager that I am incredibly proud of, because he's a good young man. He's
Right.
a 16-year-old that will still walk into the room with his friends around and give me a hug and tell me he loves me.
That's
16-year-old
awesome.
boy. I'm like, win column, we did something right, you know.
Praise God.
You know.
So I'm curious, when you sit down and actually analyze who you are, let's say you sit down with your wife, we'll just do this scenario. What kind of questions are you asking yourself or asking your wife or asking together? Whatever.
Mhm.
What kind of questioning is going on there? Because I'm just assuming you're asking yourself questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And and again, let me preface this with, there isn't a right or wrong answer to these kinds of questions. There are just answers.
Right.
So, you know, and first off, I would suggest, if you and your spouse are doing it, first do it separately and then come together and talk about each other's answers. Because part of the value in this is discovering, what do y'all see the same and what do you see different? And then talking through, okay, now what do we see as a family? You know, what are our core values as a family? So here's example questions, and there isn't really necessarily this definitive list of ask these 17 questions, but I'll give you some examples. You can ask questions like, what does wealth mean to you? When someone says somebody's wealthy or rich, okay, what does that mean? Believe it or not, by the way, because some people are now thinking of an answer and go, well, everyone, it's this.
Yeah.
I've seen 1,000 answers to that question. Okay. When you talk about what are things that you would, the hills that you would die on, what are things that are so important to you that you would be willing to fight for them? Make a list. Okay. What are things that whenever you see them in the world, they create automatic emotion in you? What are the things that make you laugh? What are the things that make you cry? What are the things that make you angry? Because often out of those things are core, you know, their identity questions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like
You
core
know,
convictions and
yeah,
those
I
kind of
mean,
things.
the things that make me angry, flip them around, and they're things that I value. You know what I mean? I mean, because it makes me mad whenever that doesn't happen, you know, for either
Right.
for me or for someone else. You know, what are the injustices in the world that cause you to stand up and go, no, this should not be. Okay.
Right.
This must be fixed. By the way, if you're entrepreneurial minded, a lot of the stuff that we're doing right now is also the kind of brainstorming you can start doing around what are the things that you should maybe be going and doing as a business too. Because these are things that get you fired up and passionate. And business is hard, so you want to do something that,
Right.
you know, gets you at least a little bit of energy. So you keep doing all of these sorts of exploratory questions, and so that's some that would get you started. And then the pace behind it is, don't just think about what, think about why. What's the emotion behind it? What's the journey behind it? Okay. You can really, if I don't know if you've ever seen Zig Ziglar's Wheel of Life, you see these
Mm.
wheels of life, right? The 7 components of our life. You know, there's financial, there's physical, there's a relational or emotional, and so on, right? There's these different components. You can literally go through these components, these 7 components, and say, what is in my life? You know, and what is the thing that I would sacrifice everything to have within this component? So when it comes to my physical health, how important is that to me? What am I currently doing in this area? And what would I just never give up? You know, it's the non-negotiable, right? When it
Mhm.
comes to my relationships, what are the things that are, you know, I'm currently doing? What do I wish I had or wish I was doing? And what are the things that I absolutely will not give up in this area? You can kind of go through each of those 7 components and identify those 3, you know, levels, for lack of a better word. By the way, again, that's a very good self-examination tool, because if you come to something like relationship, it's like, oh, I value it very highly. Now, what are you doing in this area? Well, almost nothing. I'm never spending any time with my family. You're out of alignment.
Right.
Okay. We need to do something about that to bring that back into alignment, because you're out of alignment. And do that long enough and it's going to explode.
Yeah.
Okay. This is why guys have heart attacks. This is why guys have midlife crises. This is why, all of that comes from living a life out of alignment long enough. Okay. Because we just can't do it. Our bodies, our brains, we're not designed by God to live out of alignment our entire life. It just can't happen. If that makes sense. Does that help?
Yeah. That's really good. And you and I had emailed back and forth before, and we were talking about this framework that you kind of walk guys through, and that was kind of the first step of it, is understand who you are, because if we're trying to be more productive and get our lives in alignment, you mentioned here how a lot of the systems that are out there are designed for one type of person or one personality or one kind of temperament, but we're all different. We're all unique. And so one of the first steps in developing this kind of framework is to figure out who you are. What are your values? What are your core convictions? What do you actually want out of life?
Right.
And then you can move forward out of there. So let's take that to the next step of the framework, which you say is master the process of planning, reviewing, and revising. So can you kind of walk us through that?
Sure. So here's the thing. Most of us are very accidental about how we use time. So I will give you an example. Okay. Let's just assume it's Monday morning. And you get into work, it actually is Monday morning when we're recording this, by the way, but because listeners you may or may not be listening to Monday morning. Let's just assume this is Monday morning, and you get into work and you open up your email and you have the, fill in the blank moment, where you suddenly realize there's 3 emails from your boss, all marked urgent. Right. And suddenly your life is like, your whole week is gone. It's like, what am I going to do? Oh my goodness. My whole plan. Oh wait, I didn't actually have a plan for the week. I'm kind of reacting. Okay. And you read the 3 emails and they're all about the same thing, right? Because what it was is something exploded over the weekend. And so the boss freaked out and sent you, 3 emails about how you need to be fixing this right now. And maybe you were on a trip or whatever. You didn't look at email over the weekend. Most folks do, even though they maybe shouldn't, but let's assume they did, and they didn't, and they get in Monday. And so it's like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And you're in react mode. You're back on your heels. You're trying to figure out what's going on, and you work through the week in that entire mode. And you get to Friday and you look up and you realize that there were 3 things that you absolutely had to get done this week, and you haven't done any of them.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're coming in on Saturday, to get those 3 things done. And you're working Saturday or Sunday, okay, or whatever, or staying late.
Or every night, yeah.
Or all 3, all throughout the week, okay. And the reason why is because, number 1, you didn't have a plan. And number 2, you didn't have a system to integrate where your plan is adaptive, okay. That's the revising part. But some of us do the planning piece. So we sit down and we go, okay, let's figure out what I'm going to do today. Usually that's about as far as we get, and you kind of sit down in the morning and you kind of put together a plan for the day, and you fill every moment of your calendar with some task. Yep. And what happens when one thing goes wrong? And wrong here could be, you thought this was going to take you an hour and it actually took you 2. Yep. Wrong could be someone walks in your office and says, hey, by the way, boom, you need to do this too, and drops a stack of papers on your desk. Wrong could be the stupid computer didn't work right this morning. Wrong,
or and updating.
You're on the phone with IT, or it's updating. Wrong could be whatever. It doesn't, there's a million things. When I say goes wrong, I don't necessarily mean catastrophe happened. I'm talking about life.
Yeah.
Normal stuff happens. And so you have to have a plan, but you also have to have a process by which you can review and revise that plan. And you have to also have a plan that's robust enough that it plans for the fact that there's going to be stuff that happens that isn't expected. You again, let's acknowledge reality. Okay. So like, for instance, when I plan my day, I plan a 90-minute block of time that I mark as unexpected, unplanned. Why? Because I usually in a given day lose about 90 minutes. On a bad day, at least, I'll lose about 90 minutes to stuff happened. I don't know what it was, but I don't know what it's going to be, but I can predict that something's going to happen. And guess what? On a good day, when I get to that block and I've actually had a smooth day and everything's run perfectly, I've also got a system where I've got a list of these are the next things I want to be working on. I've got 90 minutes free. I'm going to do this task. So instead of sitting around for 90 minutes going, I've got nothing to do, I'm going to have, let me go play Minesweeper on, or Solitaire
Check
or
Facebook.
whatever. Check Facebook for 90 minutes. Been there, done that. Whatever. I can actually use that time productively, and you used the word efficient earlier. I can use it for something that I want to do. Okay. But on that plan, by the way, I put in the first thing that goes on my plan is the time that I commit to my family. I block that time off before I do anything else. I started doing that even when I was in the corporate world. So for those of you that just mentally said, yeah, but you're self-employed, you can do that. I even did that when I was in the corporate world. Okay. I didn't when I was doing it wrong. But as I learned, I began to say, okay, no, this is my biggest priority. This is what's most important. Let me block that first. Let me put those things in first. I need this vacation day. I need this day where I'm going to leave early. I'm going to do these things so that I can spend some time pouring into my family, because that was important too.
All right, guys, wanted to take a quick second to tell you about the Iron Men Mastermind. If you're looking for a band of brothers that you can lock shields with, that can go to battle with you in the day-to-day life, who are also in the trenches going through the same struggles and the same challenges that you are going through, I suggest you check out the Iron Men Mastermind. This mastermind was developed and designed for Christian men to help us become the men that God has created and called us to be. And it's designed to help us increase our relationship with God, increase our relationship with our wives, increase our relationship with our children, and begin to provide better for them financially, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, relationally, in all of those areas, those things that wake you up in the middle of the night. These are the kinds of things that we work on. These are the kinds of ways that we can help you out in the Iron Men Mastermind. If this is something that is of interest to you, you may want to join the Iron Men community, and you can check out more information at dadhackers.us/Ironmen, one word, Iron Men there. All right, now back to our show. Maybe you could tease that out a little bit more and talk about that transition, because I think that's where a lot of guys are. And we can always get better in that area of, okay, I'm not investing in being intentional and purposeful with my family because I'm letting my business, I'm letting my side hustle or whatever just run over my entire life. And now I want to begin making plans and making the transition to be more intentional with my family. So talk a little bit more about how you went into that.
Sure. So I started using an actual, I used basically it's a spreadsheet, but it's a tool that's set up to be a calendar. Okay. And so I use a combination of a couple of tools. The tools aren't what's important. What's important is the process. So I'm going to focus on the process. So I'm going to tell you the tools just because everyone always asks, well, what tool do you use for this? But realize you can replace these tools with different tools. System still works. Doesn't have to be these tools. So I actually have a single point of contact for all of my to-do stuff. Just the list of next actions, next junk. What do I have to do today? What do I have to do this week? What do I have to do this month? What do I have to do this year? All of that. That's in a tool called Asana. I use a calendar for actual appointments where I have to be at a place at a time. Okay. In other words, if I'm in corporate, I have to be in the meeting room at 9 in the morning, because there's a meeting and I'm expected to be there. Nowadays, I have a client call at 1 p.m. I need to be on the phone with the client at 1 p.m. Doesn't matter that I'm standing here in my office, which was where I was right before 1 p.m. too. I still have an appointment because there's a fixed point in time and a fixed place. Does that make sense? Yep. So calendars are not actually good for blocking out time for to-dos. You can block off time so nobody else can schedule an appointment at that time. But it's not really like I want to put, these are the actions I'm going to do today. You need an action list for that, okay? By the way, you can even go like old fashioned. It doesn't, again, tool doesn't matter. So I use Asana, but it's
you block off times in your calendar, and those times are set aside for completing the actions of whatever's on your to-do list.
Correct. So the time on the calendar, I choose. If it's a day where I want it to be relatively open, okay, in other words, other people can come in and dictate things happening to me, right? I need to leave time unblocked on my calendar. Now, clients can schedule appointments and those sorts of things, okay?
Right.
But if they don't schedule an appointment, I have to have an effective way to use that time. So I use a third tool, which is really just a planning sheet. In other words, I use a journal and a spreadsheet where I'm putting down, these are the 3 things that I really have to get done today. These are the things that are going to build me towards, because I review big to small. You can also plan small to big. There's not a right or wrong. Different people wire different ways. So in other words, I think about where do I want to be at the end of the year? That's what I mean big, annual. Okay, great. If I want to do these 3 or 4 or 7 or however many goals I have by the end of the year, now let's work them backwards in time. Which one am I going to focus on in the first quarter? Which one am I going to focus on in the second quarter? Which ones am I going to focus on in the third quarter? Some of them I'm going to focus on all year. Some of them have a seasonality to them. I want to only focus on them in Q1. Identify that, break them down by that. And then kind of within those quarters say, okay, great. These are kind of what I want to focus on this quarter. What do I want to do each month? What do I want to do each week? From that, I kind of have a broad structure. That's the big plan. But then I have to start thinking about, okay, great. What are the next actions, right? I mean, the goal is really the destination, but it's made up of a journey of 1,000 steps. So what are the 1,000 steps? What I may not know, if it's a new thing I've never done before, I don't know all the steps yet. So then I'm just breaking it down to, great, what's the first thing I need to do? That's all I need to know. I'll figure out the second thing after I do the first thing. Come back, great, this is the first thing I need to do. I'm going to do it on Monday. Then I need to decide, is this important enough that I need to block off time on my calendar to get it done? Or is this something that real truth is, if I don't get it done Monday, I could get it done Tuesday, and it's not the end of the world. I have to kind of assign a weight to it. This requires some thinking. So I do all of this planning on Sunday night. I plan the whole week, okay?
That was going to be my next question.
And it takes me an hour to, sometimes an hour and a half sometimes, because I'm really looking at my annual goals. I'm looking at my quarterly goals. I'm looking at my, monthly goals. And I'm thinking, okay, this week, last week kind of went to heck in a handbasket. And these 4 things that I was supposed to get done, I didn't get any of them done. So man, this week I really have to get at least 2 of those done. Let me look at my calendar. When can I block off some time to really concentrate and do deep, focused, intense work on these 2? Well, look, Monday morning is a good time and Thursday afternoon is a good time. Okay, great. Block those off. I don't want anyone else coming in. So you kind of begin to gain control of your time. You can do this, by the way, in corporate. Okay. I had a rule. I told my bosses, see, this is, I had bosses, I had people that could come in and say, you're meeting now. I told them, I'm like, look, I have a certain amount of time that I blocked off on my calendar just so I can get the things done that you've told me are the most important things that I want to get done. if you put a calendar invite at that time, I'm going to come to you and I'm going to say, you need to tell me which of these is more important, because you told me this is important and you've told me this is important. And you're now telling me to do both, and I don't have enough time to do both. So what is more important? Help me figure it out, because someone's going to give. Okay. And, and you're my boss, so you need to help me figure out which needs to give. Okay. Guess what? My bosses loved that. And all of a sudden I started getting stuff that used to take me 8 hours, 72 hours a week is what I averaged. I started working a 40-hour work week. Okay.
Wow.
I started going home at 5, and I got everything done that they wanted done, so this wasn't sacrifice work, but it was because I started being very deliberate because you know what? The truth is most of us waste a crap load of time at work.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't believe me? Walk up and down at your work and watch what's on people's computer screens. And count how often they're doing this, right?
Yeah,
I'm looking at my phone, how often are they doing that, right? I mean, we do a million things during our 8-hour workday that aren't work. Okay. But, and by getting that, I got control of my life again. And I started being able to go to my son's band concerts. And I started being able to go to my son's, he's in band, so football games to watch him in band. We have the T-shirt that says, "What's the football team doing on the band field?" Which, by the way, in Texas gets you really glaring looks. Let me tell you.
Oh, I bet.
But yeah, I mean, it's taking control of it. So I do this now as an entrepreneur. I did it when I was in the corporate world, and it's important to recognize that, because a lot of times people will say, "Well, I can't do that because I'm in corporate. I can't do that because I'm an entrepreneur."
Right.
Yes, you can.
Yeah. Two comments, Scott, or one comment and a question. I read Michael Hyatt's book, Free to Focus, and in there,
great book.
He was talking about, really, really good. He was talking about that principle. You were working 72 hours a week, and you were able to get that same amount of work done in 40 hours a week when you focused.
Mm-hmm.
And in there, I can't remember the exact number of hours, but they did some research and found that people that worked a typical 40 to 50 hour a work week, once you got past about 50 hours a week, you actually started to become less productive. Right. And people that were working 60, 70, 80 hours a week weren't actually accomplishing more than people that were working 40 or 50 hours a week. It's that law of diminishing returns. And actually it was working backwards for a lot of the people.
Right. It begins to suck efficiency out of you.
Right.
By the way, historically, that's why we have a 40-hour work week. Okay. It was actually back in the days of industrialization, Henry Ford and all of those guys, they did these huge studies where these efficiency experts came in and studied time and how people were working, and, created efficiency curves is what they called them, where they found out that kind of the cusp point where when you go past this, you begin to lose efficiency across a large number of people, is right at a 40-hour work week and 8-hour work day. So corporate said, we're going to implement a 40-hour work week and an 8-hour work day. Now, more recently, there's been some additional studies, and they've gotten a little more nuanced than what they did back in the early days. And they've actually found out, that's number one, there's variability to this. It's not the same for all of us,
right.
And then number two, it's, there's some things about, it's not just the number of hours, because there's things about work culture and work environment and, what kind of task are you doing and this sort of thing that affect that too.
Right.
Depending on the kind of work you're doing, you can lose efficiency sooner or later. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The follow-up question to that was, when you were going through this process of not having any time blocked off to getting very more detailed and structured with your day, was this an overnight process? Did this take a while? I'm assuming it wasn't like Monday you came in and boom,
No. Yeah, nowhere close to that. It probably took me 2.5 years to get it fully implemented in a corporate environment.
Mm-hmm.
Once I learned it and implemented it, it's one of those things where it kept getting better. Some of it was because, again, I didn't have anyone to teach me this. I didn't have, Michael Hyatt's stuff wasn't out there. James Clear's stuff wasn't out there. Charles Duhigg's book, The Power of Habit, wasn't out. I began to read. I began to study. I began to kind of put my own systems together because, there wasn't as much out. There was stuff, but it wasn't as put together. Okay. There was GTD, David Allen, Getting Things Done was one of the first ones I read. And what I began to do was cobble together from these different systems. Because again, getting back to what you said about, they're kind of designed, all of these are really designed for sort of, GTD works really well for certain people in certain environments that have a certain personality, mindset, and so on.
Yeah.
Free to Focus works really well for people that have a certain mindset and so we have a tendency to write the systems that work for us. By the way, me too, but at the same time, there's also some core things where you begin to look at these and you begin to go, okay, how I do this may be different, but it's important that I do this. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of what I'm looking at when I talk about plan, review, revise, how you plan may be different than how I plan. The fact that you plan is what's important.
Right.
Okay? The Eisenhower quote, plans are not important. Planning is everything. This is, Dwight D. Eisenhower said that. He was talking about the war, but the point is by going through the action of planning, you suddenly now have some power that you didn't have before. By implementing a process where you actively review and figure out, am I on track? What am I doing? What do I need to adjust? What do I need to be doing different today? What do I need to be doing different next week? You begin to move closer and closer. And so, it took me about 2 to 2.5 years to really kind of put something together that worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that works, that worked well, and educate other people. Because especially in a corporate environment, a lot of the things that dictate your time come from outside, and it's other people, and you have to educate other people as well on, here's what I'm doing, and this is why you should care, because it's going to make you, I basically, I used to tell my bosses, my job is to make you look good. Okay, so let me do my job, and I'll make you look good.
Right.
But let me do my job. And that took a while, and you have to build trust, and you have to and then you have to experiment and find out what works for you. I would say it took me longer than it should have, but it took me almost 2.5 years.
Okay. Yeah. That's comforting to know that it wasn't like in a week you had it all put together.
No. Anyone who tells you that is selling snake oil. It takes some time. Even with a guide to coach and resources and tools and everything else, it's still going to take you some time. Even if you avail yourself of all the things that are out there now that can help you, it still takes time because you have to do it. It is hard work.
Oh yeah, it is. I have a reminder in my phone every week to review how the week went, and
Mm-hmm.
it's very hard to discipline yourself to sit down and do that.
Right.
And that's something I'm currently working on. My wife and I, we plan once a week. We literally get a sheet of notebook paper.
Yep.
Right. Monday through Sunday on it. We plan out our meals. We coordinate our calendars on there. And we usually send each other an email every weekday morning. And what do you have going on today? What do I have going on today? Just so we're on the same page. And
right. No, that's vital.
The system works for us. Like you said, it's not so much the system, it's that you actually do it. So that's
so my wife and I we do a verbal check-in because we're both here.
Yeah.
And we're not in two different locations. My commute now is 30 seconds. Behind that wall is my house. Okay. I'm in my external office, but literally I walk out that door, walk over there, and I'm in the house. And, so my wife and I do a verbal check-in. It's, hey, what do you got going on today? This, and this. Okay, great. And if anything's important enough, I put it in my, calendar and vice versa. There's things that she puts on her calendar and so on. So, we have our system to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. It doesn't matter whether it's an email, verbal, smoke signals. I don't care. The fact that you're doing it, that's what's so important.
Right. Right. So, Scott, I'm wondering, a lot of guys, me included, are working full time. We have a family, and we also have a side hustle that we're trying to grow, and we want to do it
Mm-hmm.
effectively. We want to do it efficiently. We want to do it with excellence. And there's that pesky 24-hour time limit each day. What were some things that you did when you were in that season where you were doing all three of those at the same
Mm-hmm.
time? Because you want to pour into your side hustle so that it grows to the point where it can be your primary thing. But if you pour all your time into that, then you're subtracting from your family, or your productivity and your performance at work may go down, or you may be
Right.
tempted to do some of your side hustle work at
While you're at
your
work, yeah.
while you're at work.
No one's ever done that.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Sure. I did too. It happens, and it shouldn't, because technically you're stealing from your employer. So yes, let's say that out loud.
Which is not a good rule of
not a good rule to follow.
Yeah. Not
but
good stewardship.
It does happen. The thing about all of that, so I want to take a step back, and the first one is, because I'm going to call out a couple of words that have come up 2 or 3 times, and I want to make sure we talk about them. So the first one is work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we've used work-life balance. We've talked about balance. We've used that. Okay, here's the secret. Okay, lean in, listen. Work-life balance is a myth. Okay, at least the way we think of it. Most of the time when people are talking about work-life balance, they're talking about equality. They're talking about equalness. Okay, not really talking about balance. They're talking about, well, I'm going to spend 8 hours with my family, 8 hours at work, 8 hours on my side hustle, and 8 hours sleeping. Wait a minute. That's not the right number of hours. Something's got to give. So
Right.
it's this idea of equality. Okay, our lives do not work like that. Here's the truth: we're using the word balance wrong. If you're not driving, try this experiment. Stand on one foot and close your eyes for a minute, but don't move at all. You can't do it. You're going to be rocking back and forth. You're going to be shaking. You're going to be kind of, dynamically moving. Because to balance, you notice this, by the way, when you're doing it on one foot. You do it on 2 feet too. You just don't notice. When, to balance something means it's in motion. It means it's dynamic. It means it's a moving thing. Think about it. Riding a bicycle, right? Is it easier to balance a bike when you're moving or when you're sitting still?
When you're moving, yeah.
If you're a dad, right, and you've helped your kid learn how to ride a bike, and you're running along beside him and you're going pedal, 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 because you want to get them moving, because once they're moving, they'll start to feel it and they can start to balance. Okay. Right. And then you take your hand off the back of the bike and they don't even know you have, and you're running along beside them going, keep pedaling, keep pedaling, keep. Okay. Same thing for our lives. Our lives are dynamic. Our lives are moving. And so you've got to acknowledge that. And it's okay if you're going through a season where maybe at work you do have to give a little extra time. But you have to communicate that. You and your spouse, around your kids, depending on their ages. And you need to, in other words, it's a deliberate choice. You say, this is this month at work is going to be, we're doing inventory. It's end of the year, whatever, it's the season. I just got to give it. Okay. And we've chosen to be okay with that. Then be okay with that. Don't have guilt. That's okay. If it's a season and it's got a beginning and an end, the problem is when that season becomes all the time.
Yeah.
And that usually happens because of a lack of deliberation, because you're not being intentional about it. Okay. The other word that's come up a couple of times is discipline. I just need to be more disciplined about. Is it discipline that gets us to do that? Okay. Discipline, willpower, these sorts of things, they exist, but they're a finite resource and they run out. Think about discipline as you get up in the morning and your willpower, meter is at full. Your willpower tank is full. And literally every decision you make begins to lower the tank. So you get up in the morning, you walk into the closet and you go, do I want to wear the blue shirt or do I want to wear the red shirt? You just depleted your willpower meter. Okay. You drive into work and you have to make a decision. You pull through Starbucks. Do I want the latte or do I want the whatever, Made a decision. Willpower meter goes down. So you get home at the end of the day, you've made 4 million decisions. Your willpower meter is like pegged to 0. Okay. It's 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. You're hungry and you sit down with the tub of ice cream and you empty the entire thing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Ever happened? Or is it just me?
Nobody ever does that.
Nobody's ever. It's because your willpower meter is gone. Okay. You've depleted it. So if all you're depending on is will and discipline to do these things, it never works. Instead, you have to build in the systems, the processes, and the habits. You've got to create a pattern to make this happen. You've got to create a reality around it that makes it inevitable. And that takes time. That's why this is why this is a process, not an event. You got to work towards it. You don't just turn it on and it's like, hey, it's perfect. So that go ahead.
Do you have an example that maybe from your own life that you can talk about? So you mentioned, let me just preface it with this. You mentioned, you get up, you have to make the decision of what to put on. So my mind immediately went, well, the night before, set your clothes out.
Remove that decision,
so
right? Yeah.
It's already there. Know what you're going to eat for breakfast. Maybe you eat the same thing every morning, and that's okay. That's one less decision. Is it stuff like that? Or maybe you have a personal example?
That's part of it. Okay. But it's not, even that is usually not enough. Okay. By the way, Steve Jobs is a great example of this. Steve Jobs wore the same clothes.
Yeah.
That was the only clothes he had. They were in the closet. That's it. It was jeans and the turtleneck, and it was all black and gray. It was literally, that was it. He just reached in, whoop, turtleneck, I'm going to work. He ate the same breakfast every day. Okay. And part of that, yes, if you can remove some decision making, that helps your willpower stay higher. So that is absolutely a useful thing to do. But beyond that, it's also creating the habit of doing it. So like you talked about the fact that your wife and you do the email every morning. Okay. How long have you been doing that?
The email thing we've been doing for a couple months now. The planning on Sunday we've been doing for quite a while now.
Okay. So the planning on Sunday has been kind of established as just, it's a pattern, it's a routine, it's there. And the other one is still fairly new. And maybe there's some days where it's like, oh, you look up at noon and it's like, oh, I forgot to send the email. I got to send the email real quick. Okay. And that's because in both of those cases, that's a good example of a habit at two different points in formation. Because when you first started doing the planning on Sunday, it was work to do it, right?
Yeah.
There was effort involved. You had to block off time on your calendar. You scheduled an appointment with each other. You do things to create the environment and the inevitability of this happening. You pour effort into it. Now, if you don't plan on Sunday, it feels weird.
Yeah.
Your brain has developed that neural connection that this is what we're supposed to do on Sunday night.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't do it, it's like, something's weird, and then it dawns on you, oh, wait, we didn't do our planning session because we're on vacation or whatever. You've built a habit. Okay.
Right.
And so there are processes you can use to build habits. Okay. Habit stacking is one. There's ways you can do it with what they call the fresh start effect or temporal markers. This is why doing it every night on Sunday night is good, because that's creating a time marker in your head. Okay. Where this is when we do this,
Right. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
So you're building a habit around those sorts of things. It's why if you have something that you're supposed to do every week, but it always occurs at a different time, it's really hard to remember it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Because you have no temporal marker, you have no time marker to hang it on. So, there's things like that you can do. Habit stacking, by the way, is just taking one habit and tying it to an existing habit. So we always eat dinner together on Sunday night. Immediately after dinner, before clearing the dishes, we're going to do our planning session. because you already have something that you do all the time that is an existing habit. After I brush my teeth, I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes. I brush my teeth. That's a habit. I've been doing it since I was 10 years old. I don't have to form that habit. I'm creating a new habit and attaching it to the old habit. That's called habit stacking. There's other things too, but you begin to create those habits and those systems, and processes. The system is you're doing a plan, you're doing the weekly check-in, right? The process is how are y'all doing it? In this case, it's an email. In my case, it's verbal. Doesn't matter. That kind of thing is that deliberation to create, because that removes it from willpower. There's not you don't get up in the morning and have to go, I'm going to plan tonight. It's just, we plan on Sunday night. That's what we do. It becomes a part of your routine, a part of your regular cycle, if that makes sense. Does that?
Oh yeah.
I think that's a good example.
Yeah. That's excellent. And I wanted to make sure we jump back to where that question came from. We were talking about your time whenever you were doing both corporate and the side hustle and family, and you were going over the balance myth, or what we really call balance being in motion, and this idea of discipline and willpower. And I just want to make sure we got back to that in case there was more you wanted to say, or if there was a next thing that you were going to mention.
Sure. So the key to all of that, okay, when you're in one of these situations where you're in a season where it's out of alignment, it's not equal, is to recognize that and be very deliberate about how long can I allow this to exist? What am I doing to bring it back into alignment? So let me use me as an example. So I started my side hustle in 2011. At that time, I had a fairly young son, wife. We'd started getting involved in church, so we have church activities, and I was working, corporate job. So I have all of these different things going on, and I wasn't deliberate about my time. I was constantly out of, bouncing from one thing to the other, feeling like I'm, and then as I began to kind of get more control of it, what was interesting is immediately I started getting promoted at work and getting more responsibility. It's funny, but as you manage your resources better, God tends to give you more resources to manage. This is just how that works. Yeah,
that principle.
It's in there. So I began to move up at work. Okay, my side hustle began to grow, and so now I'm juggling even more things. Okay, and then I had to get more deliberate. I got to a point where I stepped back and said, okay, I do not have enough hours in the day. My corporate responsibilities are taking me, said, an average of 72 hours a week. Some weeks it was 80, some weeks it was 40, but it was averaging 72. I'm trying to run my side business with my wife. I'm trying to see my son and spend time with my family. All of these. I do not have enough hours in the day right now. I cannot do all of these things. First off, acknowledge that reality if that's your reality. Now choose what is going to give. Okay. Are you going to quit your job and go do your side hustle full time? Or are you at a point where you can do that? I wasn't. I tabled my side hustle for about 2 years. Okay. By the way, you'll notice it took me about 2 years to kind of get the time system implemented in a way where I got back to 40 hours a week, and I tabled my side hustle for about 2 years. Coincidence? No, that's the 2 years. Okay. And then when I kind of got control of my time again, I again very deliberately said, okay, I want to wake up the side hustle, and here's what I'm going to do at corporate to keep my corporate from taking over. So I literally gave them, I said, in a year, I'm stepping down from a senior management position. I want to go back to, this position that requires less of me, because part of my job in senior leadership, I did a lot of travel, and the travel part on top of, now I'm physically gone as well as time-wise gone. Didn't like that. I need to take control of that. Well, to do that, I have to step down from my position. While I'm doing that, I told them I'm going to give them a year. During that year, I start growing the business. Now I step down. Okay, now I've got even more time. I'm still giving time to my family. I'm still giving time to my church. Now I'm going to step up and grow the business even more with that extra time. So again, it's a very deliberate, active process. I gave 1 year's notice at my day job. I literally gave him a letter and said, July 28th of 2017, I'm resigning. Okay. I gave that to them in August of 2016.
Wow.
Okay. I gave them 1 year's notice, so I knew, I had a plan, I know I've got to grow this business to this level to be able to leave. So I grew the business to that level. Okay. That level, by the way, was not what I was making in my day job, but it was enough that with everything else my wife had done financially and, through good stewardship, we knew we could eat, we could keep the lights on, we're not starving, and we can grow it from there. And then as I left the day job, I continued to grow the side business, and, it's where it is today, which is much better than where it was in 2017. Still growing, and I still have plans, but
Yeah.
it's going the right direction.
Yeah. So I would imagine not every guy is in the exact same position as you were, where they could step back and step down a level to relieve some time. But the general principle of being very deliberate with your time, focusing on balance and doing things so that you're not depleting your willpower and your self-discipline to set you up for better success. Those are kind of the underlying principles that are upholding your ability to be productive and hit your goals, so to speak, in family life and in your side hustle and in your business life.
Correct. Exactly. And again, don't focus as much on the how as you just called out. That's the what. Okay. That's the why. The how I did it, you may do it a different way. That doesn't make it better, worse, right, or wrong. It just means you have a different path. But be deliberate, be intentional, design it. Don't just, the biggest problem I think that men have today is that we are living life passively instead of actively. We're letting life happen to us instead of us happening to the world. And that's, we are called to be warriors, warriors for God, warriors for Christ. And that doesn't sound like passive and letting life happen to me. Warrior sounds active. And and again, does that mean you have to have your own business? No. Okay. You can do this in a corporate environment. You can do this in, with your own business. You can do this as an employee. You can do this as a technician. The where doesn't matter. Take control of your life and live it for God, and everything else suddenly starts to work.
Amen, man. That was well said. You just hit on a topic that's been fresh in my mind about being warriors and taking territory for God and those kinds of things. And we could probably go another hour on that. But
well, we'll do it another time.
Yeah. So
I will leave this just because I have a reputation, and so I've got to fulfill my reputation. So my managers at work, when I worked corporate, they used to walk into my office with a problem or, something they needed help with or whatever. And they literally would start the conversation with this: I know you're going to recommend a book, but other than the book, what else can I do about? Okay. Because I have this, I'm a big reader. I've read tons, and that's how I learn. And so I have a tendency to recommend books. So a great book for you and for any of the dads out there that has nothing to do with time and productivity per se, but does, if you really read it, is Wild at Heart by, I believe it's Eldridge. I'm probably getting his last name wrong, but it's Wild at Heart. If you look it up, it's a bit out there a while, but it's talking about this idea of the male spirit and the fact that, we are not designed to live our life passively. We are designed to live our life as active participants in our life. And by the way, that's not saying women aren't, and, not taking anything about from women at all, but it is something that we as men have our own unique version of that. And it's a great book. It's a great resource for that.
Yeah. I've read that book a number of years ago, Wild at Heart. Yeah. I'll definitely link that up in the show notes so guys can take advantage of that. Well, Scott, man, I really appreciate your conversation, all of your wisdom and insights and advice. And you really laid out a nice process for us to kind of go through and see if we can't be a little bit more intentional and better stewards with our time. So Scott, if guys want to connect with you, follow you on social media, take advantage of some of your products and things that you have going on, what's the best way for them to connect?
So I actually have a landing page that I've set up over on my website, and I would tell people to start there. If they go to inspiredstewardship.com/dadhackers, okay, should be easy to remember. I actually have a link there. I have a podcast as well. They can find my podcast over there. There's a way they can set up just a 30-minute meeting if they want to have a chat. I also have a link I have a course called Productivity for Your Passion, where we explore actually kind of more about how to do this. And walk you through some of the mindset, beliefs, habits, and tools. There'll be a link to that over there. So all of that's over there. They can find me on, pretty much all the social media under either Inspired Stewardship or Steward Coaching on Twitter. And then Inspired Stewardship is on Facebook and all of the other places pretty much. So you can, find me that way as well. There's links to all of that over on the website as well, inspiredstewardship.com/dadhackers.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'll link those things up in the show notes as well. Scott, one last question before we wrap things up here. And I like to ask a lot of my guests this question, and it's a near and dear question to my heart. In your opinion, Scott, what makes a great dad?
I think the biggest thing for me that I try to do, and again, some of this comes from my own family history, is being somebody who my son can trust at the end of the day, loves him no matter what. That unconditional love. Now, that does not mean, we're not best friends. I'm his dad. I'm not his friend. There's still days that I have to go to him and go, you did the wrong thing and here's the consequence. There's limits, there's all of that. But at the end of the day, he still knows that even, at the worst of times, even if he's really screwed up, he can always come back to me and know that at the end of the day, I love him no matter what. I may not like his behavior. I may not like a choice he made, but he is, my son and whom I love well. And that, I think, to me is the biggest thing that makes a dad. And how you show that to your kids is different for different kids, different for different dads. But it's the fact that you're showing them that makes you a great dad.
Well said, Scott. I really appreciate that. Well, thanks again so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Appreciate the conversation. And it's been an honor.
I loved it.
And
it's been fun.
All right, brother. Awesome. You take care.
You too.
All right, gentlemen, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope our conversation was a blessing to you and that you leave this episode better equipped to be the man and the father God has called and created you to be. If so, then I ask that you please leave us a 5-star rating and a quick written review in iTunes. Then make sure you head on over to the show notes to get all of the resources for this episode. While you're there, you can take part in our 5 Days to Be a Better Dad challenge, as well as get involved with our free Facebook community. All right, gentlemen, until next week, remember Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Stay sharp.